Hello, welcome everyone. It's Ross and Dan from Hive Business, and pleased to welcome Paul Graham from Christie Co here today. We've actually had a kind of a busy season of activity, helping to sell some practices very successfully, I might add. Paul's probably equally got the same kind of catalogue to tell you about, but they've also just released their recent market review, so we thought it was a perfect time to kind of bring the two together and to talk about what the findings were and actually how viewers of this can potential principals who are potentially looking at selling can help optimize their exit plan. So welcome, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ross. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining as well, Dan.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Good stuff. So the market review you do release this from time to time. I can't remember the last one was, but it's probably every 6 or 12 months. You've obviously kind of taken a little bit of time to pull some pretty insightful data together there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was always intentions to do a review last year, and as we hit March, and trying to, I suppose, anticipate what was ahead of us during that COVID period, we thought it would be more valuable to just pause 9 months, get the full year out the way, and then reflect on it at that point. And we're pretty glad that we chose that decision, because it now gives us a very clear picture of what we've went through, and I think a clearer picture of how the market is recovering.
Yeah, I mean, what's your kind of headline view at the moment? Then is it better than before?
Yeah, I think the one thing that we can really be optimistic about, but realistic as well, that good businesses pre-COVID have come out, or mid-COVID, better businesses. Mm-hmm. I think that's probably given the types of owners the opportunity of those practices to become very analytical about their business, to really get under the skin of how their business works. Mm. And they were perhaps that way inclined before, but it's been emphasised even more through the COVID window. Mm. Equally, I think those who were less aware of the business and they got comfortable and operated the same way for 10, 15 years, again, I think that's given them an opportunity to just get under the skin of the business a little bit more also. So it's been interesting to see how operators have adapted.
Mm. Well, we probably, we're at a particular moment now. We've just got through this little budget, which sharpened the focus, I think, of a lot of people, didn't it? Did you get all the deals across the line that you wanted to?
The majority got through, yes. There was definitely a CGT rush going on. I think if we look at the tail end of last year, there was a bit of concern in the marketplace where it was those looming tax changes and implications come March. Everyone kind of immediately thought, but we've got till the end of March to be able to see their deal through. But as we know from the last budget, I think that was implemented on the 6th of March, and it came into force at midnight. So, all of a sudden there was kind of an awareness, we might be losing out on a few more weeks as well when we're actually looking at March time. And then after Christmas, lockdown happened. There was a few suggestions that any onerous changes would be catastrophic to the market, and the message just started to soften a little bit. Mm. I think, and I know you guys were the same, I think the correct message to the clients who were concerned about those implications, and then seen a little bit of softening, it was still a case that you've got to proceed as though those changes are coming into force. We can't take anything by chance. So all of the deals had good momentum, and the majority of them went through, which was encouraging.
Yeah, it's very good. I mean, we're certainly aware of a couple there were casualties that perhaps weren't shepherded in the right way from external parties as well. So great result there, and great result for the clients. Yeah, to get that done. Any obvious trends that you saw emerge from the recent deals in the last quarter or anything like that?
I think the encouraging signs is that who dominates the market still, and it's despite the despite the suggestion in the market that only corporates are active, corporates are accounting for 25 to 30% of acquisitions just now. You know, the market's being dominated by the independent, whether that be first-time buyer or multi-site operator. So experienced in their trade and adding to their portfolio, they might be on to their 9th, 10th acquisition. But it's still the private market, the independent market, sorry, that's pushing the boundaries, which is encouraging to see. And a lot of that activity is from bottom up. So even some of the smaller sites that we're seeing come to the market just now, it is perfect for a first-time buyer, an associate. I mean, this is one trend that we've seen through the COVID window. The associate buying, you know, you would think, well, why would they do that in this uncertain marketplace? Well, you know, I think it's more certain being a practice owner than being an associate right now. You're securing your own destiny. So we've seen a nice pattern of those types of buyers come to the table now.
Well, you know, one of the key stats that I particularly liked in the report is that 80% of respondents, I've no idea, are you allowed to tell me where you got your data from? But
we'll not be specific. We took a whole market approach, so it was very reflective of the whole market. We didn't just cherry pick certain points.
No. So 80% think that trading patterns will be as good or better than pre-COVID. That's phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the one piece of sentiment that we received was in England when the national lockdown hit in November, the profession remained open, and that was the game changer. That really underpinned the confidence. I think if we never had that, there would still be, I think, a little bit of uncertainty in the marketplace, because we'd be thinking, what next? Are we going to be open for the foreseeable now, or if there's another lockdown, are we going to be closed or restricted trading? So I think that's been the part that's underpinned the activity.
Is that reflective, kind of reflected in the movement towards private? You know, there was a kind of weighting or an increase in the amount of private transactions that were going through, and an increase in interest in private practices. You know, if people are saying 80% of people think that the performance is going to get better, they're certainly not talking about the NHS, are they? They're talking about private. Yeah. So do you see this as a longer term trend for the market to be moving more into the private space, something that me and Ross have been thinking has been happening and should happen for many years, but it's kind of almost been turbocharged by there not being provision of NHS?
Yeah. I think there's probably a few things that has caused that uptick in private activity. One, it's because of the initial restrictions within the NHS and access issues. There was, as widely publicised, the NHS patient transferring to their neighbouring private practice or paying privately. And then there's those kind of weird and wonderful stats that come out from what we're doing just now. People on Zoom calls seeing their face more often than ever before, and seeing their teeth, and paying for specialist private treatments. They've not been able to go on holiday. There's money in the bank, and then there's this kind of trend that might appear from some economists, what they're suggesting, of this aggressive spending, or I think I heard someone coin the phrase revenge spending that's due to happen. So I think there's those clients that we all come across who are specialist private practices. They're very good at PR and promoting and advertising, and those types of businesses are really benefiting from the uptick in private activity and demand from the consumer just now.
Yeah, I think from Dan and my perspective, we've never had so many people asking for us to help to, kind of uplift their private offering, or to help them create a slightly longer pathway to moving from an NHS practice into a privately positioned practice. You know, the phone is literally ringing off the hook. As an interesting kind of part, which I'm probably don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole, but do you have any differing advice if someone was looking to sell their NHS practice or their mixed practice, which has a reasonable proportion of NHS revenue in it?
I think if if it's heavily weighted towards NHS, the messages are similar, whether you're a private client or NHS client. I would say if you are NHS or heavily weighted that direction, there is a moment that you've got probably conditions that are going to be less onerous than if you were a private dentist, particularly if you're grossing, if you're a specialist dentist grossing 500, 600, 700,000 pounds on your head, on your shoulders. You know, you'd expect the post-sale conditions to just look a little bit different versus an NHS dentist grossing £250,000 a year, for example.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the one thing that we try to advise our client or potential client is to give considerable time to allow the market to reflect that you are an integral part of that business. You know, for example, if and we do come across it, but someone might approach us, look, I'm keen to sell, but I'm keen to get out in 6 months' time. Mm-hmm. You know, that you start to sweat a little bit under the collar with an example like that. If someone says, look, I'm 5 years away from selling, I don't want to waste your time. I'm just curious about the value. You know, that is music to our ears. Those types of examples are the ones that you can speak to your client and really get them in a position to recognize that in order to maximize the value from the business, that running the process and starting now is not too soon, because the type of buyer for that practice is going to factor in a tie-in period for at least a few years. I think you want to build that into, or that type of client wants to build that into the equation.
It's funny, we've definitely experienced a lot more associates looking to buy, probably for about the past 6 months or so. So we run a discovery process, which is for associates who basically just want to figure out what's next. And obviously one of the options is purchasing a practice. And we really encourage them to almost think about what the sale where you want to get it to when you sell, because you kind of make the money when you buy the practice by buying correctly. Mm-hmm. So we're trying to get them to think about selling even before they've bought. Is that crazy advice, or is that fairly?
No, I think that's great advice. And it's hard to visualize that when they've not bought a practice, but having one eye on the exit will help define them in their ability to buy, won't it? And actually the journey in between. I mean, I know we have mutual clients before, and those examples that we have together where you frame it that way with your client. I think there's a proven track record now of the end result and some of those premiums that can be achieved. And I think that's wise advice, Dan.
Good stuff.
You're alluding kind of 5 years there. So is there is there a best way that you can see for an owner who might be watching this now, contemplating it? You're kind of reading between the lines. You're kind of saying plan early, but is there a best course of action they can take, or any kind of ingredients?
Yeah, I think that idea to plan early, but have confidence in the process. You know, what we wouldn't want is any potential client sitting there feeling jaded by the last 12 months and what they've went through in the pandemic, thinking that the market's fallen off a cliff, or we're not going to be worth as much as what we were pre-COVID and we've missed the boat. You know, I think it's important to recognise that the pandemic has created an opportunity in the market, and it's not something that type of client should be shying away from, even if they think, look, our value is going to be less. Find out, because actually you might be pleasantly surprised. And if expectations are in line, we've then got the opportunity to I suppose hone in on who the capable purchaser is for that type of practice, and start to kind of plot out the journey. And you know, I know we've done that together as well with potential clients who have just initially thought, what's my practice worth? Mm-hmm. And we run that process and get to a stage where they're comfortable with pricing, comfortable with the marketing plan that's typically done confidentially to try and find a buyer. And by running a competitive process, they then find themselves in this very fortunate position that there's a hopefully a good offer above the asking price that's at the end of it all.
I mean, Dan, from your perspective, there's often quite a bit that can be done if that price doesn't meet expectations, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons I do like working with you guys is it gives us the perfect context. So it kind of, because a lot of people don't really know what they want from their business. Sometimes they have a perception of what the value is. Often it's a little bit higher than it actually is when we do the valuation. But if you've got, okay, we could sell today, you'll be working there for the next 5 years, but you will have this lump of cash. Is that good enough for you? It almost, I don't know, it triggers a much better conversation, because if they go no, it would need to be double that, and actually I really wouldn't be too interested in staying on. It gives me a pretty clear pathway of what we've got to do over the next 5 years. So they almost have to develop the business in that direction and take themselves out of the clinic. So anything's possible. It just needs the focus and the drive and the context. And I think that's the bit that has been really useful, particularly over the past few years, that you guys can kind of come in. You don't try and charge them a load of money. You just kind of give us an idea of what they've got to do and build the relationship and take a slightly longer term view, which is really kind of deep in our philosophy, and hopefully what we bring to our clients as well, which is that, plan for the future, as opposed to kind of, Ross and I were talking about the other day, and we've seen it too many times, that don't approach us on the day before you want to sell. And you kind of said it earlier, approach us, when you're really happy with your business, because that's when we can get the real returns for you.
Yeah.
And I think it's actually the same with you guys as well, kind of working forwards.
Yeah, nothing bad can come out of the process. And even if pricing expectations aren't quite there, or our view on pricing versus clients' expectations, at least that then allows us the opportunity to say, this is what you've got to do to try and achieve that level. And there's a focus at that point.
Yeah, equally, actually, twice over the past few months, clients have spoken with you guys, and the value that's come back is much higher than we expected. And in one case, it's looking like a sale, and in the other, it's actually got the guy quite excited that what if I had a few more practices? So it's kind of, it's not, the sale will come at some point, but it's not about that. It's about having accurate information and really understanding what field position is at the moment, so you can kind of play on.
It's important to take that type of business, and I think the beauty is, with anything, the market's going to tell what it's worth. I think we're there to give advice along the way and create a competitive tension along the way. I know we've dealt with a sale together recently, and at the tail end of the summer last year, we brought to the market with a bit of trepidation there as well, because of what we had just come out of in the marketplace. And I think it was kind of evident that within a week, we knew we were going to get the type of result that we all hoped for. And I think that's just important to be able to kind of get those types of opportunities, run the process. And for those clients who I think you've just described there, are happy with their business now, might be, so daunted by the fact that if they come to the market now, that's them selling. Coming to the market is not them selling their business. When you run a process and you go through a 6-month legal due diligence process, and then you've got someone in front of you who you like and you're getting a good offer from, that feeling of selling then kicks in. But that feeling of selling will feel a lot easier then, once those points have been satisfied, than the daunting feeling initially of thinking, oh, do I want to go to the market now? They're two different things, yeah.
I mean, what I would emphasize is that there are other important components to a deal other than headline price. But what I can say is that, the deals that we've mutually been involved with, we're talking about some pretty serious sized premiums when you see a deal done correctly. So I don't want to kind of name it too many specifics, but I think it is important that the viewers kind of appreciate that, we're not talking about sharpening of a pencil. We're talking about, pretty, compound percentage points that you can see as a premium over and above expectations. And often not just, usually not just one party at the table that's there right at the final furlong. So it's there's a chasm of difference between a desperate seller, shall we say, and then a seller that will approach it in the proper way, through the proper channels, and having all the infrastructure that backs them up. So
yeah, I agree. I think, and we've been on the receiving end of those examples, Ross, haven't we, where the seller has the choice. There might not necessarily be the highest offer on the table. It might lag £100,000 between the next bidder, but the post-sale conditions are better, and the owner has that choice to be able to say that situation suits me a lot better, even though headline price is down a little bit. I much prefer that structure, that setup. You're right, a number of components. Hopefully it gets to the point where everything's aligned and it does become the highest offer, and the post-sale conditions are the ones that are as less onerous for our client as possible.
Actually, kind of anecdotally, most of the people I've been involved with, or certainly the ones that are still speaking to, they actually kind of quite pleased that they did what they did, and they're living in a nice environment at this moment in time. We're talking going back to the 3-5 years even. It's generally a healthy progression if it's the right time for you as an individual, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was always that stigma attached to those who, I suppose specifically, we talk about a corporate here, selling to a corporate where there's a post-sale tie-in. There was that stigma of selling to a corporate and losing control, and things not being as harmonious in the practice as a seller would hope. I think by running a process and seeing the number of corporate, semi-corporate buyers that are available in the marketplace, not just the kind of top 3 that are out there, I think that gives the potential seller a nice choice of who they're going to deal with. And I think in this marketplace, many of those types of corporates or semi-corporate operators recognize it's a very competitive landscape that they operate within. So I think many now have kind of really shaped themselves up, and they're out there to impress. And I think it's a healthy process by engaging in a competitive process to go to the market. You're going to be, or the seller is going to be able to find out who that type of purchaser is and who's best suited to them.
Grand. Well, if I could ask you, what have you seen that Hive business can bring to the party then? Because it often is a massive team effort. From the first moment you're thinking about taking your practice to market, all through the phases of negotiation, beyond that into the transactional part of things, dealing with the legal and the due diligence as well. Are there any kind of bits that you could pick out and,
Yeah. Easy question to answer, Ross. No, but genuinely, it's the collaboration. I think just running the process from start to finish, where sometimes advisors can just be parachuted in at their specific part towards the end when questions are raised. I think for me, it's being able to get the preamble before the business is instructed, where you guys have nourished that type of business in its life journey for the last how many years. You're almost giving I suppose, an indication of it as if you were the owners yourselves, that you know the ins and outs of the business. I think that alone is like night and day compared to some. And I think because of that I suppose the foundations of that bodes well from that moment onwards. I think when we look at the journey of going to the market, and inevitably questions are raised from buyers, there's specific questions on certain expenses and different lines within the accounts. Together we can very quickly create a package of answers that then go back to the buyer. And it's not done in a contrived way. It's just injecting confidence in that new buyer or potential buyer. When we get into the legal process, there is inevitably a financial due diligence task that's carried out by the buyer. I suppose it's important to note that's not there to catch us out or you out or the potential seller out. It's just to make sure that the buyer knows exactly what they're buying and everything sits within sync of expectations. But naturally, it flags up questions, some of which are easy to answer and some of which are just a little bit more, well, a little bit more specific that requires a robust response. And I think it's having your support in that process from start to finish that really kind of creates an element of finding a solution to any problem as opposed to focusing on a problem, which is sometimes where I think advisors can get stuck on, and it's overcoming that. And we've had examples like that recently where it's then resulted in a successful conclusion. But I think as long as you make progress in that journey from start to finish, and there's a positive outcome, that's music to our ears, but selfishly. But from a client's perspective, that's the end goal, isn't it? Making sure the client's happy, and you absolutely achieve that. It's great to collaborate on those deals with you.
Great outcomes, evidently. Well, thank you for your time. If you got like 30 seconds now, is there any one last final thought for the day you want to leave with anyone? A particular component of the report, or?
Yeah, I think it's letting the market know that the resurgence of activity in the marketplace just now is underpinned by comparable evidence. This is not an example where we're just trying to dictate the market and suggest that this is the case. The examples that are within our report are all data backed, all data driven. Through the pandemic, we've valued, advised, or sold on over 650 dental practices. In a what would be perceived on paper as a bit of a bleak market during that time. It's been far from that, and actually, I think as we recover now, coming into Q1 of this year, we've got the momentum to see a very, very good year ahead. I think healthcare in general has been emphasised throughout this pandemic. I think dentistry particularly has had that focus. And I think we'll see investors double down on dentistry just now because we've got that confidence within the marketplace.
Wow. Bold.
Yeah.
And a doubling there. I always like the word doubling. Thank you very much. I appreciate that, Paul. Thank you very much for your time today. And I'm sure we'll be in touch more, simply because we like working and there's great outcomes for our clients. So thank you very much.
Likewise. Thanks, Ross. Thanks, Dan.
Cheers, Paul.
Thank you.